Story 1. I know people are saying that due to corporate underwriting and community donations, most stations will be fine. While that is true, many stations, either because of the communities or populations they serve, will likely close. Consider donating. These stations rely heavily on corporation for public broadcasting grants to stay operational because they serve areas with low population density, resulting in less revenue from donations and memberships, limited access to corporate underwriting, fewer local or regional philanthropic institutions, most vulnerable national public radio and public broadcasting service stations. 1. Rural public radio networks. Wyoming Public Media, Wyoming. High Plains Public Radio, Kansas, Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma, Colorado. North Country Public Radio, Northern New York. Alaska Public Media and Affiliates, Alaska. Essential due to limited communication alternatives. Prairie Public, North Dakota, Minnesota, Montana. Both radio and television. West Virginia Public Broadcasting, West Virginia. Particularly reliant on corporation for public broadcasting funds. 2. Public broadcasting service stations in small or frontier markets. KTOO and KUAC, Juneau and Fairbanks, Alaska. Serve remote communities with poor broadband. WNIT, South Bend, Indiana. KBTC, Tacoma, Washington. While near a metropolitan area, it serves lower-income communities with less local funding. Montana PBS, a statewide network with limited private support options. South Dakota Public Broadcasting, KOZJ and KOZK, Ozarks Public Television, Missouri. Story 2. Did you ever kick a ball into a neighbor's yard as a child, and instead of just tossing the ball back, they popped it? Story 3. Public broadcasting service exposed my generation to Mr. Rogers and my daughter's generation to Daniel Tiger. If it costs billions, it is money well spent. Story 4. Sad that a public resource that was a formative part of my youth and my early interest in literacy and science, public broadcasting service, is being purposefully gutted. Unsurprised that the grand old party legislature is abdicating its power, responsibility, and authority to the man who they want to be king. Worried about the purposeful erosion of education and independent media. Story 5. It is sad. I do not see how Bob Ross, Mr. Rogers, Sesame Street, and the love of fine cuisine are a threat to right-wing politicians, but apparently public television is a dangerous waste of money while the coal industry is perfectly fine and should be expanded. Story 6. I feel this is a huge disservice to our country because the public broadcasting service has many good programs for children and adults. I personally love Frontline. Furthermore, because of my job, I use both the public broadcasting service and National Public Radio as sources. However, because they are losing funding, I will lose two very reliable sources. It seems the American people have lost much of the control they once had due to legislation and executive orders like this. I am not sure if the courts can do anything to stop this, but I hope we can keep those two outlets because they are vital to the American people. Story 7. I am canceling Xbox Game Pass and sending that money to public broadcasting service. I am canceling Disney Plus and sending that to National Public Radio. Story 8. An uneducated, uninformed lower class makes an upper class rich and powerful. Initiative 2025 is actually crazy. Story 9. I feel like those who want Americans to become even less intelligent than they are now have won. I recall that a certain president prefers less intelligent people. Story 10. Most of National Public Radio's funding is private anyway. I cannot, however, imagine being able to say something nice to the type of person who would want to defund the public broadcasting service. Story 11. I feel like saying an extra thank you to the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, the Annenberg Foundation, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Pew Charitable Trusts, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, the Lenore Annenberg and Walter H. Annenberg Foundation, the Park Foundation, and everyone else who donates their increasingly scarce resources. Story 12. I was practically raised on National Public Radio. Long rides in the car with my parents had it on in the background. To grow up and think anyone hates it or believes it is biased reporting is wrong. These reporters provide some of the best coverage of any topic in the world. They are honest, hardworking professionals doing a thankless job for 99% of the country. At least my local national public radio station sounds like the most sincere group of people to ever exist regarding what they report. No matter the topic, they just seem so sincere. I believe National Public Radio will be fine without their funding. I am not sure about public broadcasting service, but National Public Radio receives a lot of sponsors. Story 13. My question continues to be, where will all these savings go? Are we paying down the national debt? Are we detangling from China? What are we doing with these newly saved resources? Story 14 reminds me of that famous clip where Mr. Rogers testified to Congress about why the public broadcasting service needed funding and how it would go down today. Story 15, I hate it. It is another step towards killing the truth. Republicans dislike people who tell the truth, and many of their positions are unpopular. They rely on people believing that their positions are hoaxes, that what Donald Trump says is not what he really said, and so on. National Public Radio and Public Broadcasting Service are not biased. They are just telling the truth. The truth is anti-Republican. Story 16. It is sad to see the Public Broadcasting Service and National Public Radio losing funding, especially since they provide essential education and independent media. Story 17. This is exactly the kind of political move that members of the Republican Party want to make. Large city stations will probably survive, but this essentially removes the last source of objective reporting in rural America. Residents will become even more uninformed and more likely to vote for the Republican Party. Story 18. I think it is as Republican as it gets for them to defund the free programming of the Public Broadcasting Service and National Public Radio. Everything they do benefits the class of people who abuse money and their wealth to the point of it being obscene. Story 19. I am 19 years old and grew up with both. It is very disheartening to hear. My parents made the right choice by exposing me to these programs. If I ever have children, I will definitely follow in my parents' footsteps. Story 20. I am very upset. I grew up watching public broadcasting service and I listen to National Public Radio every day. I am just incredulous that so many of our congresspeople voted for this. So much for freedom of speech. Story 21. Public education in this country is a joke. Turning yourself over to Jesus or any religion only discourages critical thinking. So we want to defund something that is good for kids and thoughtful adults. We are making unwise choices. People often vote against their best interests. Story 22. The idea that this is to save money is a lie. There are hundreds of better ways to save money if they really want it. But National Public Radio and Public Broadcasting Service have been the boogeymen for Republicans since Newt Gingrich because they could not control the narrative. This is all about controlling the media, and it is both scary and infuriating. And kind of sad. It is much easier to destroy something than to build it, and it will take a while for things to recover if they ever do. Too bad. Story 23. I didn't have cable or satellite growing up, so the Public Broadcasting Service was most of what I watched. Other kids watched SpongeBob. I watched Are You Being Served? The Public Broadcasting Service is one of the most affordable and effective ways our government has positively impacted childhood development. Of course, Make America Great Again wanted to dissolve it. Story 24. Ridiculous looking at all these adults who probably learned to read, count, and empathize by watching Sesame Street. Yet they can't wait for it to be defunded. Oh wait. Their parents wouldn't let them watch it because it was considered woke. Story 25. When I used to drive more for work or school, I always listened to them. Car Talk, Away with Words, and Wait, Don't Tell Me. They reported from remote locations about people's lives that no other agency cared about. I donated my old car when I bought my newer, but used car even though I wasn't well off because I truly saw them as a good public service like libraries. I don't listen to them as much anymore, but this news breaks my heart. Story 26. I felt the same way when Donald Trump was elected both times. It was awful. I saw this coming from a mile away. He has been doing this kind of stuff since the 1980s. Story 27. Angry. I do not know how else to put it. I am tired and angry. I gave up years ago trying to effect change. I moved to the mountains to get away from humanity 10 years ago. I just want to feed my birds, tend my garden, and sit by the river listening to National Public Radio. That is all I wanted. These people found a way to even disrupt that. I am just tired of these objectively harmful people who support Make America Great Again. Story 28. Canadian here. My love of science came from watching Western New York educational television as a kid. Public broadcasting service is invaluable. I literally cannot calculate the good it has done for the United States and Canada as well. Story 29. The rural, isolated, low-information areas, mostly the South and Midwest, affected the most by this defunding are the same areas that produced the individuals who decided an oily, creepy, slick-talking businessman from Queens, New York, was fit to be elected twice as president. People get what they deserve. Story 30. Never listen to National Public Radio, but if a news story comes across my feed, I always look for reporting from National Public Radio. I am enraged about the public broadcasting service for a variety of reasons. However, I have been a longtime supporter and donor to the public broadcasting service. If I need to donate more, I will. Story 31. They have always felt like the calm in the chaos. No screaming, no drama, just facts, storytelling, and a bit of Mr. Rogers when you need it most. Story 32. I do not think it is a good idea. If the United States federal government actually wants to reduce the deficit by cutting spending, I suggest they focus on the Department of Defense, which has failed 33 audits in a row. Story 33. Didn't Fred Rogers make a plea to Congress for this funding? He would be so sad to see how cruel people have become. Story 34. I'm sure more people would be angry if they could read. Really though, the Republican Party will just celebrate whatever bill they can pass and make up a motivation for it. They claim tax money was wasted on television shows and so on. Story 35. I might sound like an idiot for saying this, but I honestly cried when I found out. I grew up watching public broadcasting service kids with my friends, and it was such a crucial part of my life. I learned so much, and I truly think it shaped where I am today. It is sad to know that there is a possibility the next generation might not get that. Even public broadcasting service as a channel had great shows. I always learned so many amazing things every time I had it on. National Public Radio has been my go-to for the 5-minute news briefs, and I will be very sad if they go. Story 36. I am livid. Donald Trump has weakened the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the Public Broadcasting Service, National Public Radio, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and practically everything else. All to use the money for what exactly? Story 37. Terrible. I increased my donation from $5 per month to $20 per month. I have canceled most streaming services so the extra can go to National Public Radio and Public Broadcasting Service. Story 38. I am sad there was no reason for the Trump administration to shut them down. They are nothing but fascist pedophiles. Story 39. The people who oppose public broadcasting service and National Public Radio claim that they are biased and promote left-wing propaganda. In reality, the only two news outlets not directly funded by billionaires with an agenda are those accused of bias and suggested to be defunded. It is possible that the media you consume, controlled by billionaires promoting propaganda for their own benefit, has skewed your perception of reality. Just because something does not align with your worldview does not mean it is biased or wrong. Story 40. Public Broadcasting Service and National Public Radio are infinitely more worthy of funding than immigration and customs enforcement. So are National Aeronautics and Space Administration and National Science Foundation, while we are at it. Story 41. It is fine, we can just generate artificial intelligence content for our children. God, I am so upset at Silicon Valley right now. Story 42. The people who claim Public Broadcasting Service and National Public Radio are liberal propaganda have never watched or listened to Public Broadcasting Service or National Public Radio. Story 43. National Public Radio will be fine. They were primarily funded by other sources, and the government funding was minimal. Public Broadcasting Service has faced opposition from the political right for decades. Mr. Rogers saved it once by convincing a prominent right-wing member of Congress that it was a necessary program to fund. However, we have not had another advocate like Mr. Rogers since. As a result, we are losing one of the primary sources of unbiased information still available today. Story 44. It is frustrating. When the Democrats are back in power, they will make sure funds are restored. In the meantime, I canceled my Paramount subscription and started donating the monthly amount I had been paying to National Public Radio. Story 45. I feel sad. I think public broadcasting does a lot of good, and the cuts will hurt the poorest and most rural areas the most. Story 46. I think we should be reducing Congress's salaries and entitlements. Any politician who makes a six-figure salary does not need us to pay for their meals. Story 47. It costs the American taxpayer less than $2 a year to fund these services, so I am angry. First, we have to understand the myth about public broadcasting service and National Public Radio is completely wrong. These are not public services used by just a small part of the country. They are publicly funded services used by millions of Americans. At the cost required to keep them going, it is a steal. It is hard not to look at the bigger picture and see that the real issue here is not the budget. It is that they are upset. Upset that public broadcasting service and National Public Radio air programming that challenges their narrative. Their big sin was deferring to experts. Say what you want, but it is tough to watch their content and claim it has liberal bias or is silencing conservatives. Their shows are usually objective, focused on public interest topics that corporate media ignores, and they bring in actual experts. If you talk to climate scientists, artists, anthropologists, journalists, or advocacy groups, you might hear things that challenge conservative narratives. Climate change, homelessness, marginalized communities, endangered species, some unknown jazz musician from the 1950s, new research in medicine. Maybe you will even hear a special interest piece about a disabled lesbian Navajo basket weaver who lost her livelihood to drought. Honestly, that is fascinating. I would rather hear about that than have all my media filtered through my uncle's social media page or some hedge fund commentator on cable news dragged out to comment on Israel. This is nothing other than an attack on institutions that could provide counter-narratives to the Republican agenda, disguised as tax-saving measures. If you do not see it any other way, start seeing it that way. Story 48. I apologize for this. I am extremely upset that the corrupt individuals who run this country are so blatantly self-serving. I am so tired of it all. To the supporters of Donald Trump, I strongly disagree with your actions and beliefs. You may face consequences due to your support of the former president and his followers in Congress and the Supreme Court of the United States. I hope you reconsider your stance given what may come. To those who refuse to vote in 2024, I am especially frustrated with your decision. While Kamala Harris was not a perfect candidate, she was a better choice than Donald Trump. To the members of Congress, I am deeply disappointed by your capitulation to authoritarian forces. You should be ashamed. If you do not oppose attempts to undermine our government by Trump and his allies, you should be held accountable. Story 49. To a lesser extent, another wave of exhaustion I have been grappling with for a long time. The same way I felt when I realized I will never be able to escape microplastics or forever chemicals in my body. The same as when I heard about the concentration camps and masked American agents kidnapping innocent people to send to concentration camps. The same as when I heard those 10,000 baby penguins drowned because global warming melted their glacier. The same way I felt when I drove across half the United States with my sister expecting at least some beauty, but it was just depressing and ugly chain strip malls, highway systems, litter, 18-wheelers, and roadkill. The same as when my MRI was denied by United Healthcare 3 times before my company changed insurance, causing the process to start over. The same as when I lost my 10-year design job to a freelance artificial intelligence artist along with my healthcare. The same as when I know now I will not be able to get an MRI or know what is wrong with my body or even get my teeth fixed for the foreseeable future, or maybe until it is too late. The same as how I know I will probably just need to kill myself if I get too old if things keep going in this direction, which is what insurance companies would prefer. Instead of nostalgia for my idea of and hope for the world as a child, I have an aching vast emptiness and lack of hope for the future. Sometimes I have anger at my mother for voting for these evil clowns while she actively wants me to have children I will never be able to afford. But I do feel pity for her that she is able to be so willfully ignorant, frankly stupid, and gullible. These technology oligarchs want the working class to be poor, destitute, uneducated wage slaves. They want forced births, no health care, and tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt to weigh us down. Or they just want us dead. It is a continuation of a path of despair for the working class while growing a cartoonish amount of wealth for the billionaire oligarchs. Story 50. All I think about now is where my tax money is actually going. Services are being cut. Where is my money? Story 51. I pay taxes and this is what I want my taxes to go towards. I do not want my taxes to go towards wars overseas. Story 52. Not gonna lie, National Public Radio has been terrible for at least 10 years. I am still opposed to defunding it. However, I must admit National Public Radio has become useless, and after 2 decades of being a member, I stopped and I do not even listen to it anymore. Attention Reddit, I do not agree with the bad orange man. This is bad and I am on the correct side. But I would be a liar if I said I would miss National Public Radio's parade of foolishness. I cannot speak to public broadcasting service as I was not watching it. Story 53. NPR had really alienated me in recent years. It was for more than 10 years my go-to station. I don't drive much, but for a very long time, whenever I drove, I listened to NPR. I could have put on podcasts, but it was a nice change of pace. Then, about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a shift. They aired many programs focused on rare sexual identity-based perspectives. While driving to the suburbs with an aunt or cousin, I turned on NPR, and immediately it was like, as a lesbian pandemi, I believe this. Well, as a trans queer non-binary, I believe this, and so on, presumably for the whole program. I could never stand to listen very long. This did not happen once. This is not an anecdote. Over several years, I continued to give my beloved NPR the benefit of the doubt and kept tuning in, hoping to catch programs without rare sexual identity perspectives. Yet, time after time, I would get burned, and my aunt or cousin would laugh uncomfortably and say, "What are you listening to?" I would have to change the channel out of embarrassment and because I didn't want to hear about that stuff either. There was probably a correlation with the times I was driving, typically Saturday and Sunday late mornings and evenings. Maybe weekday programming wasn't as focused on rare sexual identity perspectives as weekends, but I lived a 10-minute walk from my office and never drove during the week. So I had to stop listening to NPR, and I'm kind of annoyed they stopped caring about me as a listener. I have to say, I don't really care about any funding cuts. All their hosts who drove me away can go back to Tumblr. They'll be fine. Story 54. Essentially, as an American, I feel like we are being violated. The people who are supposed to represent us are ignoring us. They are just submitting to the dictator, thinking they will be considered one of the good ones when the assault is over. They are wrong, and I hope they realize it sooner rather than later. Story 55. Not good at all. Their educational shows are the best, and I am still trying to find where the bias is. Story 56. Bad. Just bad. It is all bad. Why do people even bother asking this question? They know the answer. Stop karma farming. Story 57. I do not like it. Public radio is sometimes one of the only ways that many smaller or more rural communities receive their news. Cutting funding for public radio seems short-sighted and not well thought out by the current administration. Story 58. It is so dumb knowing that the United States government spends more on Viagra and Rogaine for the military than it gives to National Public Radio and the Public Broadcasting Service. Story 59. Controlling media is one of the steps of turning into an autocracy. Make America Great Again has been following the process step by step, and they are just getting away with it. The only thing we learn from history is that we do not learn from history. Story 60. Intelligent people will find other ways to stay informed and knowledgeable. Those who are not will not participate anyway. Basically, I dislike it. Story 61. Angry and confused that anyone is celebrating this. Upset that fear-mongering works so well to get something like public broadcasting service defunded. Story 62. Evil is winning. Public Broadcasting Service and National Public Radio have always been a bright spot in broadcasting. Where is Mr. Rogers when you need him? Although Donald Trump would probably deport him. Story 63. I would curse them with the language I used when I worked with the Navy, but Public Broadcasting Service and National Public Radio raised me better. Especially LeVar Burton and Mr. Fred Rogers. If we need to make an underground distribution of quality, thought-provoking content behind such endeavors, the life's work of those fellow public servants may someday soon see a brighter day. At a bare minimum, recordings will become required consumption for my next of kin. Story 64. Frustrated. These stations report on topics important to their local communities and host community events to help connect people to each other and to helpful resources. They choose the national programming they carry, so they support shows that reflect local values. Story 65. Disgusted. Just like I have been with all the other nonsense they are pulling. The country is not, nor has it ever been, perfect, but for goodness sake, I wish it was turning into what I was raised to believe it was and not the opposite of everything we are supposed to be. Story 66. Given the replies so far, I would say Americans do not really care about the defunding of the Public Broadcasting Service and National Public Radio. However, it certainly fits the pattern of what the Trump administration is doing, trashing American culture and replacing it with bullying and selfishness. I am surprised Immigration and Customs Enforcement has not shut down public radio broadcasting completely. Story 67. Just more poor decisions from the Trump administration that cannot manage basic tasks. He wants to punish National Public Radio because he believes their news organization is biased. However, most of the funding they cut goes to local public broadcasting service stations in rural areas that cannot raise enough funds to support themselves. Therefore, his voters, not those in Democratic states that support National Public Radio and its news organization he dislikes, will be hurt. National Public Radio receives less than 10% of its revenue from the government and will absorb that loss easily. They will continue to report on Trump for the foreseeable future as they cannot be shut down. It is not a government entity. Story 68. I am truly dismayed by the defunding of Public Broadcasting Service and National Public Radio. The bigger picture here is the continued attack on the press. These are all hallmarks of fascism. We keep going down this road, and I fear it is becoming too late to stop it. Story 69. PBS is very important to our democracy, and now it is at risk of being eliminated. It seems our tax dollars are going to billionaires' tax breaks, the military, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement instead of things we actually need. Story 70. As a non-American, it is clear that you have been facing significant challenges for at least 30 years due to your own systems. There is no universal health care and only 2 weeks of vacation. That is outdated. The current situation is just the final straw. All the safeguards have failed. I feel sorry for you, but enough is enough. You all need to stand up, get organized, and fight. Story 71. The segment of Make America Great Again that yearns for a time when they felt all Americans were more unified is oblivious to how much of that was due to the liberal media dominance they have made it their mission to destroy. Story 72. Devastated, embarrassed, ashamed. Just one more thing the right has taken away from the American people with no good reason. Story 73. Donald Trump is busy dismantling everything he cannot find a way to turn into a profit center for his associates or a way to support his personal power. Story 74. I truly hope this inspires a large number of people to support National Public Radio and Public Broadcasting Service with even $1 per month, or whatever they can. I also hope they earn enough from this support so they never need to worry about government funding again. I hope everyone who donates deducts that donation from their taxes to offset any taxes owed at the end of the year, and also to challenge any auditors who review small-dollar donations. I hope people teach their children that donating to National Public Radio and Public Broadcasting Service is the right thing to do, as long as both continue to provide a good public service and are honest in their offerings. Story 75. NPR devotes a minority of its time to news. They have news on the weekdays before 9 a.m. They have short news segments before 3 p.m. BBC News comes on at 3 p.m. This is the routine on the weekdays. They play classical music and hit Light Parade between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. on the weekdays. Do those on the right feel threatened by musicals, classical music, and jazz? They entertain people with wait, don't tell me on the weekends. Does this really concern the right? Story 76. I think the effects of losing public broadcasting will be felt in many ways we do not yet realize. Story 77. I have always been a fan of both. However, if I am being honest, they have become too left-leaning and progressive and should just stick to shows about penguins and family heritage. Story 78. I'm quite annoyed. Mr. Rogers fought for that so children could have educational shows. What do you think he would say about all this? I think he would be severely disappointed. Story 79. Honestly, I think it is a crying shame. It again harms those with the very least. Public access television and radio have been a godsend to many households, rich and poor alike. Story 80. Devastated. It instilled in me a love of learning since childhood and introduced psychology to me, which is the field I am now pursuing. Story 81. I was raised on public broadcasting service shows because we were too poor to afford cable television. I am very grateful for all they have done. It is very sad. Story 82. This is the death knell for the truth in America. National Public Radio and Public Broadcasting Service come from an era that understood that journalism was necessary for a free society and a stable democracy. By attacking them and weakening their organizations, they have intentionally assaulted journalism again. We are nearing the end of democracy in America. Story 83. I watched Public Broadcasting Service about as much as I watched Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network. Not as much as I got older, but shows like Super Y and all those airing from 2009 to 2011 hold a deep place in my heart for sure. Story 84. I am actually devastated because what are we going to do for reliable news? I hope progressive supporters keep them going for as long as possible. Story 85. It is sad that a grown man, if you can call him that, and his gutless followers are scared of a network that brings so much joy to many people. Pathetic. Story 86. WGBH Boston is a remarkable television station. Over the years, many children and I have enjoyed programming created by these wonderful people. WGBH, now known as GBH, is a major producer of public broadcasting service programming. Some of their notable shows include Nova, Frontline, Masterpiece, American Experience, and This Old House. They also produce popular children's shows like Arthur, Curious George, and Molly of Denali. Additionally, WGBH has created programs like Antiques Roadshow, Evening at Pops, and Zoom. This is disheartening and cruel. I will do everything in my power to elect members of the Democratic Party in the midterm elections. Story 87. The agenda they are opposing is kindness, learning, and fairness. They do not want those ideas spreading. Story 88. It is just another action Republicans have taken to further reduce the intelligence of the American electorate and ensure that everyone is as easily manipulated and fear-driven as the average conservative voter. Story 89. The vast majority of people not stuck in a right-wing echo chamber are varying degrees of upset, angry, or anxious. Story 90. It is not really a problem for the Public Broadcasting Service or National Public Radio. They receive a lot of funding from people. It is the subsidies for the smaller local stations, the ones in remote areas that need it to survive. This is another bill that targets low-income areas. Story 91. Just another reason not to have children. I grew up on Reading Rainbow, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, The Magic School Bus, Ghost Rider, and Lamb Chop. The future is bleak. I regularly watch the Public Broadcasting Service NewsHour instead of cable news. We live in a society where uninformed people do not listen to knowledgeable people. Story 92. Angry as hell. The billionaires who will benefit from that money should be angry as well. Story 93. National Public Radio and Oregon Public Broadcasting constitute an incredibly small percentage of the overall budget, making the amount seem insignificant. Story 94. Public Broadcasting Service changed my life by broadcasting live theater. National Public Radio has been my friend for 30 years. My son went through a wild Kratz obsession when he was little. We are losing the beautiful things that make life enjoyable so that a few wealthy people can get richer. Story 95. It's not just about defunding the public broadcasting service and national public radio. It is about the current administration targeting news media that they do not like, just like totalitarian or authoritarian governments do, or extreme governments such as North Korea, China, and Russia. Story 96. I am pretty upset. I grew up watching public broadcasting service. Not everyone has access to the internet and streaming, so it is an important service. Story 97. I feel like truth and democracy are taking a serious pounding in the former president's second term. Truth Dies in Darkness has become riveting storytelling. I'm not a fan. Any fool can tell a story, and the more stories we hear from the former president, the darker it gets. Very soon, those of us who care about truth and facts are going to need flashlights just to find our way home. Also, I feel like America's national anthem will probably need to be changed. Maybe from "Oh Say Can You See" by the dawn's early light to "As Truth's Light Surely Fades." The former president plans birthday parades. Not so good that maybe we should have a contest to see who can rewrite the national anthem to better fit the new America. The winner gets a 4-year supply of flashlight batteries. Hopefully, that will be enough to get through this democratic crisis. Story 98. As a conservative, I rely on my local public broadcasting service station for a higher standard of reporting. Much of local news, especially Fox News, is terribly slanted towards sensational stories that are more emotional than factual. Real local news is often overshadowed, sometimes for the entire newscast, by helicopter coverage of police chases. I am sad and angry. The Republican Party is dead to me now. Story 99. What I know for sure is that public broadcasting service and national public radio will continue providing high-quality content for everyone, free of charge. Story 100. It hurts to be honest. I grew up on public broadcasting service shows like Arthur, Curious George, and Wild Kratts. I still watch them every once in a while. They are very near and dear to my heart. Now that I am a bit older, I love to watch Antiques Roadshow, Nature, and Nova. This station is very special to me and many others. It makes me sad that politicians want to take away such a great learning tool for children and adults. Hopefully, my local station can stay afloat. I am in a decent-sized city, so it may have more support. Story 101. Angry, disgusted, and scared. Soon we will have one news source, and we will never know the truth. This is straight from the Project 2025 handbook. Story 102. There are large sections of the Dakotas and Montana that are not covered by the public broadcasting service, limited by the ultra-high frequency band restrictions. I did not know what the public broadcasting service was until we moved to Fargo and Bismarck. The stations there seemed to always be conducting pledge drives. Farmers and travelers used national public radio to stay informed and awake during long hours of driving a straight line. Choices were very limited because so few frequency modulation stations existed, and their limits were not much better than the ultra-high frequency restrictions were for the public broadcasting service on television. Story 103. Disgusted and unsurprised. I actually saw somebody defending the cuts by saying children can watch formerly free content on paid streaming services instead. Story 104. I watch public broadcasting service and listen to national public radio in the Bay Area. I do not partake in the children's shows and have no gripe. Their news and opinion programs are entirely anti-Republican, much like the public broadcasting service's entire board of directors. It is like the opposite of Fox News. All they had to do was bring back programs like Firing Line, where there is a dialogue of opposing views, and they might have been spared. They did not because their audience would not accept it. Basically, it is not public broadcasting. It is left-wing broadcasting. As an independent, I do not feel the government needs to pay for listener-sponsored programming. As Peter Coyote once said on Democracy Now!, where the host was putting words in his mouth, there is no democracy on Democracy Now! There are multiple ways for rural areas to get news. We have been paying $4 to $8 billion a year to get internet to rural areas. Story 105. A bunch of nonsense. Ever since Sesame Street criticized our very sensitive, self-centered president, he has been upset with them. Besides, he favors those with limited education. Story 106. Furious. I am so angry all the time. But I am especially furious at the defunding of the public broadcasting service and National Public Radio. Story 107. If you are of a certain age and cannot attribute any of your foundational literacy skills to the public broadcasting service, you are not representative of the American experience. Story 108. It breaks my heart that Generation X was for the most part raised on the public broadcasting service. We grew up with Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers. My family did not have cable for most of my childhood, so the rhythm of our weekends was set to Nature, Nova, This Old House, and the New Yankee Workshop. Julia Child was a treasure. We must all donate to help keep rural stations afloat. They need us now more than ever. It is very telling of the state of our nation when the home of Mr. Rogers and Julia Child is under attack. We have lost our decency and common sense. Beyond donating directly to stations, I am convinced the only way out of this mess is with money. Money talks, and if we stop giving it to billionaires, this ugly turn in history might just turn toward decency again. Mind where you shop, the apps you download, and the payment processors you use. Be thoughtful. Story 109. The most reliable and balanced news. The United States is much more literate because of generations of educational and informative programming. Story 110. I would care a lot more if they had not spent the entire last election attacking Donald Trump. Now, I feel indifferent. They deserve it, and I vote for the Democratic Party. Story 111. I worked as a fundraiser for the public broadcasting service. It involved going door to door. People often dislike door knockers. However, many thanked me for visiting their homes. Children would follow me around, excitedly sharing the shows they watched and what they learned. Parents expressed how wonderful the programming was for their kids. Now, I am raising my child using programming from the public broadcasting service, which is excellent. My 2-year-old learned to count from Sesame Street. I had been starting to teach her, planning to begin with 1 to 3, and suddenly she counted to 10. It is truly effective education. Studies show that public broadcasting service children's shows are as effective as preschool for educating children, with lifelong positive benefits through college and beyond, especially in low-income households. Does the Republican Party want to take away hope from children? Story 112. To put a human face on this, there are independent documentary filmmakers who have worked for years on their projects, written and received National Endowment for the Humanities grants, only to have them pulled when they are already in production. It is very hard to get a National Endowment for the Humanities grant. It is a very rigorous process. This is how many Ken Burns films get made, as well as many others. These films show diverse views of history, especially American history. These films are about ideas as well. Imagine, you finally have the money to finish a big piece of work. The funds were legally allocated. But now you have spent all that time for nothing because there are not many funding sources for independent media makers in this country. Independent media is what they do not want. Control of the media is what they want. This is a fascist playbook. Story 113. I grew up watching the public broadcasting service. This is very sad. America is becoming like Nazi Germany. Feels like Hitler reborn. The end of an empire. It is a real shame. Story 114. It is unwise and ineffective. The return on investment for many of the soft power actions we take is significant, yet the opposition fails to recognize it. Story 115. Normally, I would say this is wild and unacceptable. With the current political chaos, it is just more noise and nothing is surprising. I had never donated to National Public Radio before, but we are writing a check for $5,000 next week. I know it is not much, but I am hoping people will rally and help financially for the next few years before we return to normal. I consume a lot of news and have a steady mix of National Public Radio and Joe Rogan as my primary radio outlets, with British Broadcasting Corporation and Cable News Network as my main television outlets, and The Economist, The Wall Street Journal, The Arkansas Democrat Gazette, The New York Times, and Al Jazeera as my go-to print and online sources. Honestly, if I had to lose everything else and have only one news source, it would be National Public Radio. A lot of the other ones serve a very specific purpose for me, but National Public Radio is just good old-fashioned news. Story 116. Our local station that serves 1 million people is losing $250,000 per year. No layoffs are planned. It is rough, but we'll be okay. Story 117. What other sex scandals are associated with public broadcasting service staff, in addition to the infamous Charlie Rose affair? Here are a few other incidents involving public broadcasting service-affiliated talent or executives that surfaced publicly in recent years. Lindsay Clark, 2018. In late 2018, Public Broadcasting Services Washington, District of Columbia Bureau Chief Lindsay Clark was placed on leave amid allegations of an inappropriate online relationship with a younger colleague. Clark eventually resigned. Public Broadcasting Service did not publicly release details of any internal findings, citing privacy concerns. Net Vice President, 2017. A senior programming executive at Net, the New York Public Broadcasting Service flagship, was accused by two former staff members of making unwanted advances and sending sexually suggestive messages. Net launched an internal review and the executive took a leave of absence. Shortly afterward, they left the station by mutual agreement. UNC-TV station manager, 2019. In 2019, UNC-TV, North Carolina Public Television, suspended its station manager after a freelance filmmaker alleged he had coerced her into a sexual encounter during a work-related trip. The station's subsequent investigation led to his dismissal. No criminal charges were filed. Context and takeaways. Public television stations, like many media organizations, have faced a wave of Me Too-era complaints. Most of these cases were resolved internally, with minimal public disclosure of outcomes. In nearly every instance, public broadcasting service affiliates instituted or revamped sexual harassment training and reporting procedures. Story 118. Okay, so if public broadcasting service and National Public Radio are so invaluable, they should have no problem recouping that money by selling advertising, just like every other radio and television station in the country. Story 119. It is a travesty and a blatant attempt by conservatives to stay in power by keeping the rest of us as uninformed as they want. If you live in a market that has a station at risk and can afford to donate, please do so. This is important. There is nothing more important to the health of a democracy than a well-informed electorate. Story 120. As a former 10-year public broadcasting service affiliate employee in a major market, I can attest that the executives all make well over six figures, doing little productive work. They also receive perks and freebies. The rank-and-file studio staff receive very little, similar to any corporation. Public broadcasting service stations also have private underwriters, providing them with millions of dollars. Most also rent out publicly funded facilities to for-profit private companies and run paid advertisements as well. Remember, most of the funding comes from private donations. We are talking about less than a 2% budget cut. There is nothing public about them now. Story 121. I do not think the government should fund entertainment media or news, especially when it is financed with a maxed-out credit card. Story 122. I'm going to get downvoted for this, but I sincerely hope all the people with any sort of financial means on this thread start donating to National Public Radio and Public Broadcasting Service. Otherwise, this is just complaining and virtue signaling. I do donate to Public Broadcasting Service monthly and have donated to National Public Radio as well in the past. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.